sweet, let's get paid. And so he goes along on this heist, and it's successful. They steal some jewels, and they sell them, and his cut ends up being around 15 grand. And Murph is looking at all this, and he's like, well, that was the easiest money I ever made. Let's do it again. And so they keep this hustle going. Murph and Alan, they surf by day, and they cat burgle by night, climbing onto rooftops and jumping between balconies to steal jewelry from old rich ladies and tourists, and they're making a lot of money from this. And soon enough, they get another friend involved. This guy, Roger. And Roger ends up being their lookout and their getaway driver. And this is all working great for them. But pretty quickly, I guess they get a little bored with Miami. I guess they robbed all the good places already. So Murph, Alan, and Roger, they take a road trip from Miami all the way up to New York City, because they're trying to see if there are some places up there to rob. And while they're in New York, they take a tour of the famous American Museum of Natural History. And the American Museum of Natural History, it has one exhibit that's called the Hall of Gems, which houses some of the rarest and most expensive gems in the world. And so this tour, it leads these jewel thieves through the Hall of Gems, and they're looking at all these gems on display, and they're like, oh yeah, we need to rob this place. So they put their heads together and they start coming up with a plan to break into the History Museum and take their collection of historical gems. And these guys, they're like professionals at this, so they take the time to map out this whole heist. Like, they visit the museum and they observe the guards while they're doing their nightly rounds. They low-key check the windows in the museum for any vulnerabilities, and lucky for them, they actually see one of those windows is cracked open. And while they're planning out this whole robbery, they're staying in a nearby hotel. And since they have a surplus of money from all their Miami robberies, they're like in this hotel throwing these big-ass loud parties in the room with lots of people. I mean, they're just having a great time. So the big night finally rolls around, and Roger drives them to the History Museum. And Murph and Alan, they jump the fence and they run across the courtyard, and then Alan climbs up the side of the building, mostly using the fire escape, and then he makes it to the cracked window. And then he lowers a rope down for Murph. And then Murph climbs up, and they open the window, and they get inside, and they head over to the Hall of Gems. And once they're there, they use a glass cutter, and they cut holes in the display cases. And lucky for them, the alarms were old and outdated and no longer working. And these guys, these surfers, end up stealing around 24 stones, including 3 very important gems: the DeLong Star Ruby, the Eagle Diamond, and the Star of India Sapphire, which were worth around $400,000, which in today's money would be around $4 million. Not to mention, these are historical gems, so they are literally impossible to replace. So anyway, these guys take these gems, and they take whatever else they can, and then they climb back down out of the building, and they flee back to their hotel. The next morning, Murph and Alan, they fly to Miami, taking the jewels with them. Meanwhile, Roger flees to Connecticut to be with his family. But when the news breaks that the Museum of Natural History had a bunch of priceless jewels stolen, the story blows up, and it's all over the news. Here's the thing, though. Because these dudes threw so many parties back at their hotel, a hotel clerk ends up tipping off the police, like, yo, these 3 guys, they seem really suspicious. And so the police goes and checks their hotel room, and they find photos of the museum, a pew-pew, and burgling tools. So they know these guys are guilty. 2 days later, the FBI shows up in Miami. And boom, they arrest Murph. And also, boom, they arrest Alan. And eventually, they go and arrest Roger, too. Now, ultimately, over time, the feds do recover most of the stolen jewels. There were 24 of them in total. But they never actually recover one of the big ones, the Eagle Diamond. Like, literally, they just never found it. Now, because this is such a big news story, these guys become kind of criminal celebrities. Like, people end up rooting for them. I mean, they're surfers, they're in shape, they're kind of handsome. They become like sort of local heroes. So it looks like these guys have really benefited from all this. Until all 3 of them are found guilty, and they're sentenced to 3 years in prison. So they do their time and they get out, and Roger, he goes on to lead a normal life. But Murph and Alan, they do not. They go right back into crime, and they go back into their robbing houses and jewelry stores. But then, one day, Murph meets these 2 young women in Florida. And they ask him for help because they apparently just stole $488,000 worth of stocks and bonds from a financial services office that they used to work for. And now, they don't know what to do next. And so I guess Murph, being a criminal, he offers to help them sell these stocks and bonds without getting caught. And so within a few days of befriending them, these two women are suddenly crashing at his apartment. Which sounds kind of fun, but pretty quickly, I guess Murph finds them to be really annoying. Like, they're all impatient, and they're just driving him crazy. And so Murph and some other guy, they offer to take them out on the guy's boat. And once they're out on the water, they beat these women, and they stab them, and they unalive them. And then they dump them in the water. A month later, their bodies wash up on the shore of the canal. And Murph and the other guy, they were last seen with them. So they are very much suspects in this crime. And so, bam, they both get arrested. But unfortunately, at this point, there isn't any hard evidence, so they're released on bail. And while he's out on bail, Murph decides, yeah, it's time to rob another house. And so he breaks into this rich woman's house while she's home, and he robs her at gunpoint. And he's like, give me all your jewelry or I'm gonna throw this boiling water on your niece's face. Jesus, Murph. But lucky for the woman and her niece, she actually has a panic button installed in her house. So she hits the panic button, and pretty quickly, police arrive. And Murph is still there, and there's like a whole shootout between him and police, and eventually, bam, they arrest him again. And he goes to trial, and he's found guilty of both trying to rob that rich woman's house and unaliving those girls on that boat. And he gets back-to-back life sentences. Oh, but it's not over yet, because in prison, Murph is gonna continue to be a turd. In prison, he actually becomes some sort of a drug kingpin, like making sure other prisoners get their supply, I guess. But then, one day, Murph gets a tip. Someone informs him that if he ever wants to get out on parole, the only way he can do that is if he presents himself as a changed man and say that he, like, found Jesus or something. And a lot of people think that this is absolute bullshit, but suddenly he starts proclaiming that he found Jesus, and he starts preaching to other prisoners in the prison. And I guess it works, because then, after 17 years in prison, after 2 life sentences, the parole board believes that he's a changed man, and they ultimately let him out. Wow.
Apply when I restock. I'm sure you'll find something.
Huh?
Welcome back. Need anything? Come back when I restock.
So this little kid, he might be one of the best con artists I've ever seen. Let me show you. Now his name is Juan Carlos, and he lives in Colombia, and so far he's had a really hard life. But Juan Carlos is about to do whatever it takes to succeed. So one day, he sets out to make that happen, and he heads to the local airport to catch a flight to Miami. But little Juan Carlos, he can't afford a plane ticket. So he sneaks onto the tarmac and he climbs onto a cargo plane. And he hides out in the wheel well. And he allegedly holds on real tight while the plane takes off and flies 3.5 hours from Cali, Colombia to Miami, Florida. Then the plane lands, and allegedly Juan Carlos falls out of the wheel well. And he just lays there on the tarmac, unconscious. And airport staff, they eventually find him. And he's shivering, and he's disoriented, and he's just a wreck. But he tells them, not that his name is Juan Carlos, but that his name is Guillermo. And that he's 13 and from Colombia, and that his parents had died. And that he doesn't have anyone else, so he fled to America. And his story just blows people away, because they feel sorry for him. And so the local media, they start covering it. Then a police officer in the area, this guy, Lozano, he's driving home one day and he hears the story on the radio that they found this 13-year-old kid who had been hiding in the wheel well of a plane. And Lozano is so moved, he goes and he volunteers to be Juan Carlos's temporary guardian while the state figures out what to do with him. So Juan Carlos goes and he lives with Lozano and his family. And this changes his life. Suddenly, he's not living in poverty anymore. And this middle-class lifestyle feels like wealth to him. And they've got all these nice things, and so he tells himself that soon he's gonna have nice things too. And within a few weeks of living with Lozano's family, Juan Carlos starts stealing. And things around the house go missing. Plus, he's been disappearing for days at a time. And Lozano and his wife, they start thinking that something isn't adding up about this kid. Then, one day, they get a call. And it's the Colombian consulate, who had just gotten some important information. Turns out, Juan Carlos isn't actually named Guillermo. He's named Juan Carlos. And he isn't some innocent kid. He's actually got a criminal record. And he isn't 13. He's actually 17. And his parents aren't dead. They're actually alive and well back in Colombia. And he probably didn't ride in the wheel well of that plane. It's more likely that he rode inside the plane with the cargo. And he just lied about it all because it made a better story. So Juan Carlos is just a little con artist, trying to con his way into the United States so that he can have a better life. And so, bam, they immediately detain him, and they deport him back to Colombia. Oh, but this isn't over for Juan Carlos, because for a moment, he got a taste of a much better life, and he'll do anything to get that back. So, over the years, Juan Carlos tries his best to scam his way out of Colombia and get back into the US and other countries, using different aliases and fake IDs, but he ends up getting deported, like a bunch of different times. And while all this is going on, Juan Carlos, he's there developing the perfect con. Here's his perfect con. Juan Carlos dresses up real nice, pretending to be a rich man, and he goes into a 5-star hotel, and he tries to make it look like he's a guest there. He hangs out in the lobby and at the hotel bar, and he'll chat with the staff a little bit, just to make sure that they know. And as he's doing this, he also takes note of other guests. He'll memorize their name, he'll memorize their room number, then he'll go to reception, pretending to be that guest. And he'll say that he lost his room key. And reception, they'll recognize him like, oh, this guy, he's been hanging out in the lobby for a few days. Of course he's a guest here. So the hotel will let him in the room. And while he's there, he'll steal money and credit cards and jewelry and whatever he can get out of the guest's luggage. Then, to make it worse, he'll then call the hotel security desk and tell them he's locked out of his safe. And security, they'll come up to the room and they'll open the safe for him. And they don't question anything because he's already in the room. So of course they think it's his room. So then Juan Carlos takes everything from the safe and he leaves the hotel, a slightly richer man. And this con works. In fact, it works really well for him. So Juan Carlos does it repeatedly, hotel after hotel after hotel, just raking it in. Until one day in London, boom, he gets arrested for using a credit card he had stolen. But Juan Carlos, he's ready for this. He's been thinking about it a while, and he gives police a fake name and he skips bail and leaves town. And then a year later, he's back in London, pulling off his same con, and then bam, he gets arrested again for using another stolen credit card. This time, he gives them a different fake name and a fake ID. And he ends up getting off with a small fine because they don't realize he's the same guy they arrested the year before. So Juan Carlos continues with this pattern. He travels the world using fake names, fake IDs, and robbing hotels. But a few years later, he makes his way back to London again. And there, he hits 4 more hotels and leaves with over $100,000 worth of cash and jewelry. Now, at this point, a couple of London detectives have started to take notice. This detective, Swindells, and this other detective, Plowman. So Swindells and Plowman, they've started to piece a lot of this together. And they end up connecting a bunch of these robberies back to the thief, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile, old Juan Carlos, he's already fled. He's living the good life. He's got money, he's got clothes. He finally has nice things like he's always wanted. But it's just not enough. So Juan Carlos keeps going. And within a couple of years, he ends up in Las Vegas, where he pulls off his infamous scam and he ends up stealing $350,000 worth of cash and jewelry. And one of the hotel rooms he robs is allegedly Celine Dion's room. So that's fun. And then, about a year later, Juan Carlos is back in London again. And he hits up even more hotels. But then, one night, Swindells, he's out, and he's walking back from a bar he was just at. And he just happens to stop outside of a supermarket. And he sees a man leaving that supermarket. A man wearing a long leather jacket. And Swindells recognizes him. Because by sheer fucking coincidence, he just crossed paths with the Juan Carlos. Now, Swindells has never seen Juan Carlos in person, only in mugshots. But he's been working on this case a long time. And he knows it's him. So then, pow, Swindells arrests him. And he goes to trial, and he's sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Oh, but this story isn't over, because Juan Carlos really likes his nice things. So 3 months later, he's in prison, and he happens to have a dentist appointment. And he ends up charming the prison guards to let him go out to his dentist appointment alone. I guess this is some kind of like open prison where they're not as strict. And so they just let him go to the dentist alone. And of course, he flees. And from there, somehow, he makes his way to Dublin, where he steals a credit card and pulls his infamous scam in yet another hotel. And that is where he screws up. Because that puts this Irish detective on the case. This guy, McGlynn. Now, McGlynn, he goes and he looks at CCTV footage from some of the stores that Juan Carlos had used that stolen credit card at. And pretty quickly, he identifies the thief in the footage. He knows it's Juan Carlos, the same guy who had walked out of prison not too long before. So McGlynn investigates further, and he concludes that Juan Carlos must have just gotten to Dublin. So he's likely staying in a cheap hostel in the city where he can keep a low profile. So McGlynn spends 2 days searching all these hostels in Dublin. And then he finally finds Juan Carlos hiding out in a hostel with tons of items he had already stolen. And so kapow, he gets arrested again. Here's one of his mugshots. And he gets sentenced to 2 years in prison, but then an Irish judge rules that he can be extradited to France to face even more charges there, because he robbed a bunch of hotels there too. But then, while he's there in France, he's released temporarily, and then just like that, Juan Carlos disappears again. A few years later, he's busted by a customs agent at a gas station in Vermont after he had entered the U.S. illegally. And he's sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. And after that, he gets out and he's arrested again in a hotel in Hong Kong. Then he's arrested in France again for robbing another hotel, over $200,000 worth of cash and jewelry. And from there, he's sentenced to prison again for 15 months. This dude is allergic to freedom. But now he's out, and his current whereabouts are actually unknown. But I'm just going to take a wild guess and say he's probably still out there robbing more hotel rooms. So shout out to Colombia, London, Miami, Dublin, Las Vegas, France, Hong Kong, and Vermont.
You gotta hear about this. Go from idea to illustration faster with generative AI in Adobe Illustrator. Generate custom graphics, create seamless patterns, and instantly fill shapes with detail and color. Try Illustrator today. You won't be sorry.
This police officer is so bored with his job that on his lunch break, he's gonna go rob a bank and then return to work as if nothing happened. Now the guy, his name is Andre, and Andre is kind of a thrill seeker, and he's police captain at Kempton Park in South Africa, and unfortunately, he's not happy with his life, and he starts looking for a bigger thrill. And then one day, kaboom, he decides he's gonna rob a bank. So he catches an early flight from Johannesburg to Durban, and there he rents a car, drives to a bank in town, puts on a wig and fake beard, and he walks into the bank, and he points his pew-pew at the teller, and he asks the teller, "Will you please fill this bag with cash?" Then he takes the cash and he leaves, and he catches the next flight back to Johannesburg. And so boom, the robbery is a success, and it's a thrill for Andre. So he decides to rob another bank, and another bank, and another bank. And soon enough, every time he gets a day off from work, he flies to Durban and robs another bank. He even starts robbing local banks in Johannesburg on his lunch break. Like, he'll rob a bank, and then later on that same day, he'll go back to the scene of the crime to investigate the robbery. Because he's the police. And he disguises himself so well, none of the witnesses ever recognize him. And he's really good at this bank robbery thing. He knows exactly how the bank security systems work, so he knows how to avoid getting caught every time. And this goes on for 3 years. Andre robs around 30 banks during this time, and this is a huge thrill for him. But then, one night, he screws up. So he's at this party one night, and he's getting a little tipsy. And he starts talking and
G54.
having a conversation with his friend, this guy, Core. And Andre's bragging to Core that he's been robbing all these banks and that he's so good at it. Here's the thing about Core, though.
I-18.
Core just happens to work for the Bureau of State Security, which is kind of like the FBI.
N43.
And Core feels like, because of his job, he just can't keep a
064.
secret like this. And eventually, he tells his supervisor. So the next time Andre flies
069.
back from Durban, having just robbed another bank, police are waiting for him at the baggage
B12.
claim. And so, bam, they arrest him. And he's supposed to spend about 17 years in
G57.
prison, but that's not gonna happen, because he's gonna bust himself out.
G58.
Now, while Andre's in prison, he meets this guy, McCall. And he meets this other guy,
N35.
Hale, both of whom are in prison for robbery. And pretty quickly, they all three
B7.
become friends. And after about 3 years in prison, Andre and McCall and Hale,
G48.
they come up with this wild plan to bust them all out. First,
I-22.
Andre and McCall, the two of them, they fake injuries so that the prison guards will escort them to an
B6.
outside physiotherapist for treatment. And then once they're at the physiotherapist, bam,
N39.
they overpower the guards. And they grab the guards' pew-pews, and then they steal the physiotherapist's
G59.
car, and they use it as a getaway vehicle. And then once they've escaped, they lay low for a while.
N32.
3 months later, they go back to where Hale is, guns a-blazing, and they bust him out too.
I-19.
So now the three of them are together, on the run, hiding out. And so what does
070.
Andre want to do? He wants to start robbing banks again. He wants that thrill back.
G46.
So then kaboom, the three of them hit up a bank. And then kaboom, they hit up another
073.
bank. And then kaboom, they hit up a third bank. And these guys just keep going,
N44.
robbing bank after bank after bank. And they always wear ridiculous disguises.
071.
Sunglasses, fake mustaches, fake beards. They almost look comical. But despite that, they're a good team. They can execute
Round
a full
over.
bank robbery in under 5 minutes. Sometimes they're able to rob 4 banks in the same day without getting caught. So, because of all this success, soon enough, word starts to get out. And the local people, they start hearing about this gang of bank robbers on the news. And strangely, a lot of the public are cheering them on because they're making the police look like fools. And it's funny to them. So, Andre and McCall and Hale, they become like folk heroes. And people start calling them the Stander Gang, after Andre's last name. So this crime spree goes on for several months. The Stander Gang is
Go.
hiding out at safe houses,
B6.
hitting up banks when they can, collecting a lot of cash, and hanging out with lots and lots
I-20.
of escorts in their spare time. Now, before you start cheering these guys on
N41.
too, just know that during this time on the run, Andre was known to approach
G46.
random young women pretending to be a professional photographer. He would then lure them back to his hotel
G48.
room, pretending he's going to take professional pictures of them, and then he would
065.
essay them. And at least 2 of these women end up reporting him to the police for this.
B13.
And this will come up again later. So, eventually, the Stander Gang is named South
I-24.
Africa's most wanted. And their photos are suddenly everywhere. All over the media,
I-25.
everyone's talking about them. And the 3 guys know it's just a matter of time before they get
N36.
caught. So they come up with a plan to flee the country. So first, they
G60.
decide they're gonna buy a small yacht, and they're gonna leave the country that way. I guess it's supposed to be safer
064.
than all 3 of them flying commercial. So then Andre uses a fake passport, he flies to Fort
B3.
Lauderdale, Florida, and there he's gonna finish negotiations on the sale of this yacht. The next day,
I-22.
back in South Africa, police show up to one of the safe houses the gang had been hiding in.
068.
Apparently, police had been tipped off by some of the escorts the gang used to hang out with. So police are
N31.
suddenly outside of the safe house, and it's 5 a.m., and McCall is the only one home.
Oh,
And police are like,
74.
Stander Gang, come out with your hands up! And McCall, he's butt naked.
G47.
'cause I guess he sleeps naked. And he gets his pew-pew, and he gets into a crazy butt-naked
G49.
shootout with police. And they storm the place, and they're shooting at him, and he's running from room to
I-16.
room, shooting back. And then finally, once they have him cornered, he turns the pew-pew
070.
on himself, and he unalives himself. Meanwhile, there's Hale.
075.
As soon as Hale gets a tip that police are onto them, he bounces. He uses a fake passport,
073.
and he hops on a flight to Greece. So he's long gone. While police, they raid all the gang's
N34.
safe houses. And in one of those safe houses, they find photos of
B10.
one of the women that Andre had SA'd a few months back. And this not only confirms her
B9.
story about being SA'd, but it also confirms that this safe house belongs to him. And that safe house leads police to the yacht they
Round
bought.
over.
And that yacht leads them to a crew member they had hired to sail it. And that crew member tells them that Andre is supposed to deliver the yacht to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So now police know that Andre is in Florida. So then newspapers in Florida get word of this, and they start publishing Andre's picture in the paper. So now people in Florida are on high alert, looking for Andre. And so then, one morning, it all starts to fall apart for him. Because Andre is at a used car dealership, trying to get his car painted a different color because he had just stolen it.
3,
and there,
2,
the salesman
1.
recognizes
Go.
him because his pictures had just
G52.
been in the local paper. And that salesman doesn't say anything then, but he later calls the police.
G50.
So then later that night, police show up to Andre's apartment, and they surround it because they're about to bust
G58.
in. But Andre is actually not home. However, crazy enough,
073.
one of the officers just happens to spot him riding by on a bicycle.
062.
And the officer knows it's him, so he runs over and he confronts him. And so then Andre realizes what's
G49.
going on, and he jumps off his bike and he makes a run for it. And then the officer chases after him
I-18.
and he catches up to him. And Andre stops and he pretends he's gonna give up, and then he
N36.
grabs the officer's shotgun. And then thinking quickly, the officer pulls out his other pew-pew,
B8.
and then bang, he shoots Andre 4 times. And he unalives him.
I-19.
Here's what Andre looked like in real life. So then that only leaves
I-21.
Hale. So Hale, he ultimately ends up in London. And there, he tries to commit another
B10.
robbery, and he ultimately gets caught. And they throw him in prison for almost 20 years.
067.
Later, he does his time, and he gets out. And he becomes a better person, and he starts
B9.
public speaking. And he actually dedicates himself to educating people about the
B3.
horrible consequences of living a life of crime.
The major regret actually is the fact that I've
Oh,
wasted
72.
talents and abilities and I've achieved nothing.
That's wild. Shout out to South Africa.
N44.
This is Biggs, and Biggs is about to become
G57.
famous for a really weird reason. Now, Biggs lives in England, and he's
N39.
kind of a turd. He's been to prison a few times for, like, break-ins and stealing cars and
I-26.
stuff like that. But one day, he's out of prison, and he's living a clean life,
G55.
and Biggs wants to buy a house for his wife and his 3 sons. Problem is, Biggs ain't got
I-17.
no money. He's broke. So he calls up an old friend of his, a guy who he met back in
068.
prison. This guy, Bruce. And he asked Bruce if he could maybe loan him some
071.
money. And Bruce is like, nah, bro. But I'm actually in the middle of organizing a train heist. And he offers to cut him
Round
in.
over.
And Biggs is like, alright. And so the plan is they're gonna rob a Royal Mail train, which is a train that picks up and delivers mail. Now, one of the cars on that train carries high-value cargo, which is just lots and lots of bags of cash. Now, Bruce has a guy on the inside feeding him information about the train schedule and cargo. So he knows exactly when and where to stop
3,
this Royal
2,
Mail train
1.
carrying all this
Go.
cash. And along with
B4.
Bruce and Biggs, there are 13 other guys involved in this heist. So
B13.
15 total. But we're just gonna focus on Bruce and Biggs. So Bruce and Biggs and 13 other
N43.
guys, they put on ski masks and gloves, and they are ready to go. And they don't have
I-27.
pew-pews because this is England. Instead, they just have some metal bars
Oh,
to beat people
75.
with. And so then the big day comes, and it's 3 a.m. And all the men
G53.
go out to the train tracks, and they hide. And when they hear the train approaching, a couple of them go to
G59.
one of those track signals. It's kind of like a stoplight for trains. And they turn off a green
N44.
track signal, and they use batteries to turn on a red signal. And once the train approaches and it
G48.
sees the red light, it starts to slow way down. And that's when, bam,
N39.
all 15 men jump out from their hiding spot, and they swarm the train, and they get on board, and then
N45.
pow, one of them hits the conductor with the bar, nearly knocking him out. And then some of the other men board the
073.
car with all the cash in it, and they force the train workers to lie down on the ground. And then eventually, when the
I-22.
train comes to a full stop, the 15 men, they start loading the bags of money
B2.
into 2 Land Rovers they have parked nearby. Now, these guys steal
I-21.
125 bags of cash, 2.6
N33.
million pounds, which today in US dollars would be worth about $35
B3.
million. So then they drive the Land Rovers over to this farmhouse in the
I-25.
country that some of them own so that they can hide out there and divide up the money. And over the next few days, they all take their cut of the money and they split and go their separate ways. Now, they have hired some people to come burn down the farmhouse after they leave to hide any evidence. But the people who they hired who were supposed to burn it down, they don't follow through with the plan for whatever reason. And then police end up finding the farmhouse and they get a bunch of the guy's fingerprints and eventually, bam, Biggs gets arrested. Here's his mugshot. And also Bruce and 12 of the other guys get arrested too. So Biggs gets sentenced to 30 years in prison for this. But his story's not over. Because while he's in prison, he decides, this place isn't for me. And so he makes a rope ladder, and one day he uses it to climb over the prison wall, and he escapes. So now he's on the run, and he flees from England all the way to Paris. And in Paris, he gets some plastic surgery, and he assumes a new identity. Then he moves his wife and family from Paris all the way to Australia. And from there, he and his family stay on the run. And they move like 3 different times, and Biggs changes his identity every time. But unfortunately, it's not enough. Because one night, Biggs sees on the local evening news that law enforcement believes he's living and hiding out in the area. And so then Biggs just like straight up ditches his wife and sons. And he gets on a passenger liner and he takes it from Melbourne all the way to Panama. And then from there, he flies to Brazil. And there, for about a year, he lives under the radar, working as a carpenter. Here's the thing about Brazil, though. At this time, Brazil has no extradition treaty with the United Kingdom, so Biggs can't get in trouble for his England crimes while he's living there. Lucky bastard. And at this point, he's been on the run for about 5 years. But he's having a great time in Brazil. He's partying every night, drinking at the clubs, and one night he meets an adult dancer at the club. And we'll just call her second wife, because she eventually becomes his second wife. And these two get married, and he gets her pregnant. Now, around this time, Scotland Yard shows up to Brazil, looking for Biggs. And they actually find him, and bam, they detain him. Here's his mugshot again. And so Scotland Yard tries to work with Brazilian police to deport Biggs back to England, but Brazilian police are like, nah, bro. A, because they don't have an extradition treaty with the United Kingdom, and B, because second wife is pregnant. And there's this whole other Brazilian law that says that you can't be extradited if you are a parent to a Brazilian child. So Biggs is free to go. However, his status as a known criminal means he's not allowed to work. So he's broke all over again. And everyone now knows he's an ex-con because his story has been all over the news. So then what does he do? He becomes a sort of local celebrity. And he starts charging local newspapers to do stories and interviews with him, and he becomes like sort of a tourist attraction. Like he's the convict who successfully robbed a train and escaped from prison. And so naturally people want to meet him and have him like sign autographs, and apparently he's selling mugs and t-shirts. So he starts making money this way. He even stars in a commercial for a Brazilian coffee company. Now, I couldn't find a copy of the commercial, but here's what he actually said in it. When you are on the run all the time, like me, you really appreciate a good cup of coffee. I'm not kidding, those are his exact words. In fact, the dude is getting so famous that any celebrity that visits Rio de Janeiro during this time always has to stop and meet Biggs. Apparently, Rod Stewart stops by to meet him, and Sting stops by to meet him. The freaking Sex Pistols stop by and write a song with him, and they perform it and release it, and it becomes kind of a hit. But then, shit gets crazy again, because one day he goes to a restaurant to meet a reporter for another interview. And while he's there, kapow! A couple of goons jump him, and they put him in a sack, and they put him on a boat, and they take him to Barbados. The kidnappers are, of course, hoping to get a reward from British police for capturing Biggs. But unfortunately for them, when their boat arrives in Barbados, Barbados is also like, sorry bro, we also don't have an extradition treaty with the United Kingdom. And so they send Biggs back to Brazil, where he once again is a free man. And so Biggs, he lives his life as an escaped criminal for about 2 more decades before ultimately his health starts to deteriorate. So then finally he gives up. and he surrenders and he flies back to England to get the good health care he needs. And as soon as his plane lands in England, bam, he's sent back to prison to finish his sentence. But at least he gets good health care. And then about 8 years later, they let him out, and a few years after that, he passes away. Dude lived a crazy life.
Huh?
You know who I am. I'm Dexter Morgan.
Everybody's talking about.
Dexter.
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 Dexter?
That's what makes me, me.
So this French guy, his name's Michel, and Michel has successfully broken out of prison 5 different times. Until, well, you'll see. So Michel's pretty good at busting himself out of prison. Like once he snuck out by hiding in a delivery truck, another time he scaled the wall with one of those ropes made of bed sheets. Bro is a pro at this. He's like the MacGyver of prison breaks. But then, one day, it all changes. Because while he's a fugitive on the run, he meets this woman, Nadine. And Nadine, she's a bit of a turd herself. She's got a criminal record too. And she thinks Michel is fine. And they hook up and they fall in love and they live a life where they have to move around the countryside a lot so that Michel doesn't get caught. But eventually, they run into a big problem. They're out of money. And Michel can't just go get a regular job. He's a fugitive on the run. So he's like, guess I'll just start robbing places. And so he starts robbing places and people, and soon enough, police catch up to him and they bust him. So he goes to prison for like the 4th time in his life. And he and Nadine actually get married while he's in prison. And I'm sure it was a beautiful ceremony. But he's not there long before he gets a crazy idea to bust himself out again. And one day he gets a bar of soap and he carves it to look like a pew-pew. And he paints it black with shoe polish. Which, I gotta say, carving a believable firearm out of soap, that's actually pretty impressive. But anyway, then he has to go to court for a hearing. And while he's there, he pulls out his fake soap pew-pew and he threatens to shoot everyone in the room. And by doing this, he's able to escape prison yet again. And honestly, at this point, I'm like kind of cheering for him. Oh, but it's not over. Because then, Michel and Nadine, they run off and they hide out in the countryside for about 2 years. And unfortunately, that's when they run into another big problem. Nadine is pregnant. And if you know anything about babies, babies aren't cheap. So again, they need money to live and to raise this kid. And Michelle is like, well, guess I gotta go rob some more places. Because as clever of a guy as he is, I guess he just doesn't know how to do anything else. So he's gotta steal shit. And of all the places he could rob, he chooses a bank. A heavily guarded bank. So he goes to rob this bank, and during this robbery, it's all chaos, and it all goes wrong. And police show up, and he ends up shooting a police officer. And so he gets caught, and he's sent back to prison again, this time with an even longer sentence. Oh, but you know Michelle. He's not gonna stay in prison for long before he tries to escape again. And it takes a few years, but eventually, he and Nadine, they come up with a plan to bust him out. And this plan is wild. In fact, it's probably the craziest prison break story I've ever heard. So first, Nadine goes and she gets helicopter flying lessons from an instructor. And she takes these lessons, and after a few months of dedication, she passes the exam, and she legitimately gets her helicopter pilot's license. And this is an actual photo of her sitting in a helicopter during a lesson. And apparently, she's a decent student. She actually ends up being pretty good at flying. So then, one day, she goes to visit Michelle in prison, and she low-key slips him a note. This note tells him to meet her on the roof of the prison on the morning of May 26, 10 a.m. And Michelle's like, all right. Now, to get on the roof of the prison, Michelle is gonna need to create a distraction. So he and his prison buddy, this guy, Pierre, they steal a bunch of nectarines from the prison cafeteria, and they paint them to look like grenades. Like I said, bro is the MacGyver of prison breaks. But anyway, then the big day finally comes. May 26th, 10 a.m. And just before this, Nadine, with her new pilot's license, she goes and she rents a helicopter. And she and an accomplice fly about 19 miles to Paris proper, and they hover the helicopter over the prison. Meanwhile, inside, Michelle, he hears the approaching helicopter outside. So he and Pierre, they pull out their fake nectarine hand grenades. And they're like, we're gonna blow this whole place up if you guards don't back off. And to the guards, these look like real grenades. So they listen and they back away. And Michelle and Pierre, they make their way up to the roof. And then they bust out. And they see Nadine's helicopter is hovering there above them. And she throws a rope down. And Michelle, he starts to climb up it. And Nadine's accomplice, he pulls out a pew-pew to cover Michelle while he climbs up. And believe it or not, there are actual photos of all of this going down. And like you can see Michelle there hanging from the helicopter, and all the prisoners down below are cheering him on like, yay, go Michelle. I mean, this is all just entertainment to them. Like one of their fellow inmates is busting out. How could they not cheer them on? Anyway, so Michelle gets into the helicopter and the guards are closing in. And Nadine, she panics and she pulls away and she flees. And poor Pierre is still standing there. And he's like, oh, sacre bleu, as the guards tackle him. They left Pierre behind so that they could get away. Imagine being Pierre and doing all that work to orchestrate a prison break, and then that prison break is successful, but your partners in crime panic and they accidentally leave you behind. That poor guy. So anyway, further away, Nadine lands the helicopter in a soccer field nearby, and the three fugitives, they abandon it and they flee. And so they're out now, which means that once again, Michelle has successfully escaped from lockup. But then, about 4 months go by, and French police, they're able to track Nadine down, and bam, they arrest her, and she gets 10 months in prison. Which, to me, 10 months seems a little light for the crazy stunt they just pulled, but whatever, they caught her. Meanwhile, Michelle doesn't get caught. He's still hidden, and he goes and he tries to rob yet another bank, and during the robbery, police show up, and there's this whole big shootout, and then, kaboom! An officer shoots Michelle right in the head. Now, lucky for him, he actually survives. And he's in a coma for a while, and he's paralyzed on one side of his body, but eventually he recovers. And that's when they send him to a maximum security prison, which is probably where they should have sent him 4 prison breaks ago. But regardless, over time, he and Nadine end up getting a divorce. And while he's in this prison, this woman on the outside, her name's Jamila, she starts writing him. and they become pen pals, and eventually they fall in love. Now, the crazy thing is, she also ends up trying to break him out. And not only does she try to break him out, but she tries to break him out roughly the same way that Nadine did all those years before, with a helicopter. So Jamila hijacks a helicopter by sticking up the pilot, and she has him fly them to Michelle's new prison. But they don't even get close to the prison. The plan fails, and Jamila's arrested, and she gets 7 years. Meanwhile, Michelle, he serves his sentence. He spends 17 years locked up. He never successfully escapes from prison again, and he actually got out legally in 2003. So he's out now, and here's what he looked like in real life.
Pour une journée parfaite en Kia Sportage, je commencerai par préchauffer la voiture, puis dégivrer le pare-brise. Et j'irai au spa. L'innovant Sportage. Qu'est-ce que vous attendez? Kia, du mouvement vient l'inspiration.
You know who I am. I'm Dexter Morgan.
Everybody's talking about.
Dexter.
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 Dexter?
That's what makes me, me.
So this redneck dude is somehow able to pull off one of the biggest money heists in American history. And he becomes rich as f. Now the guy, his name's David. And he works at Loomis Fargo as a vault supervisor. And he handles massive amounts of money all day. But despite that, he doesn't get paid very much. But that's about to change. Because one day, David meets this woman at work. Her name's Kelly. And David thinks Kelly is fine, and they hit it off, and they start flirting, and soon enough, they start smashing. Now, at some point during this period, David hears about an armored truck robbery that had happened a few months before, several states away. A Loomis Fargo employee had robbed Loomis for like millions of dollars. And at this point in the story, that robber hadn't been caught yet. I actually talked about that heist in a different video I did. Anyway, so David and Kelly, they hear about this heist, and they're like, well, that guy took millions of dollars and he didn't get caught. Maybe we could also rob Loomis Fargo and take millions of dollars and not get caught. What could possibly go wrong? Now, Kelly, she knows just the guy who could help them pull off this heist. Her friend back from high school, who's a bit shady. This guy. Chambers. So the three of them put their heads together and they start planning this big Loomis Fargo heist. And there are other people on the sidelines involved in this heist too, but for now, let's just focus on these three main characters. So a few months go by and they've got it all meticulously planned out. And then the big night finally rolls around. It's time to pull off the heist. And David, he's actually working that evening. And when his shift ends, he leaves with the other employees working. But he doesn't actually leave. Instead, he circles back and sneaks back into the building. Then he goes straight to the vault and starts taking money out of it and loading it into a Loomis van. And over an hour and a half later, he's done. And he's loaded about $17 million in cash into that van. Now, David knows there are security cameras all around this building. So before he leaves, he goes back to the manager's office and he steals 2 surveillance tapes that would have footage of him on them. Next, he drives the Loomis van full of 2,700 pounds of cash. He drives it over to a parking lot in another part of town where Chambers and Kelly are waiting in a different van. So then they transfer this money to the new van. This new van is a rental van. But here's the thing about this rental van. It's a little small. So they're transferring all this money into the rental van, but not all of it'll fit. So they end up leaving $3.3 million behind in the Loomis van because it all won't fit in the rental van. Oh, but that's not the only thing they leave in that Loomis van, because David forgets those 2 surveillance videos that he had taken from the manager's office. And so from there, they all end up going their separate ways. Kelly ultimately ends up going back home, Chambers also ends up going back to his home, and David hops on a flight to head over to Cozumel in Mexico, so he can lay low for a while. But unfortunately for him, when traveling internationally, you're actually limited to how much money you can bring with you. So poor David is only allowed to bring $50,000 with him. Meanwhile, David's wife, because I guess he's married and didn't tell his wife about any of this, his wife reports him missing. And once police find the Loomis van with the leftover $3.3 million in cash in it, they also find the security tapes he accidentally left behind. So now they have their first suspect, David. And since this is such a huge heist, the FBI is now involved. But even they have no clue where David is, and his face is broadcast all over the place as the FBI tries to find him. And while David is off in Mexico trying to lay low, Chambers, not so much. So Chambers and his wife, they take all this new money he just got and they start spending it. And in less than a month, they move out of their trailer home and into a 7,000 square foot gated community mansion, which they paid for in cash. They also buy TVs, a diamond ring, a Rolex, new cars. Chambers' wife even gets a nose job and a brand new set of tits. And at one point, Chambers' wife even goes into a bank with 200 grand in a briefcase. And she asks the bank teller,
Hey, what's the most I can deposit without you guys having to report me to the feds?
and then she says,
Don't worry, it's not drug money.
so yeah, not surprising that people start noticing this behavior, and pretty quickly people report Chambers and his wife to the FBI. While Kelly, she's a bit more conservative with her spending. She buys herself a minivan, she buys her kids a bunch of toys, nothing too big. But once the FBI learns rumors that she had previously been smashing with David, suddenly she becomes a suspect. So the FBI, they get together and they decide the best way to bring these guys down is to wiretap Chambers' phone calls. Because of the three of them, he's obviously the loose cannon. Meanwhile, during all this, David, he's still chilling in Mexico, and he's keeping a low profile. But he realizes this 50 grand that he brought with him, it isn't gonna last too long. So he ends up calling Chambers, and he's like,
Hey, can you send me some of my share of the money so that I don't run out?
and Chambers is like,
Sure, buddy.
but sending David money is not what Chambers does. Instead of sending him money, he decides to hire a hitman, and he's gonna send that hitman to Mexico to unalive David. That way, Chambers gets to keep David's share of the money, and if David is unalived, he can never snitch on them. So at this point, I know you're probably thinking, Ray, how the hell did David get himself into this mess? How did an otherwise nice guy with a clean record suddenly wake up one day and decide that he's gonna steal millions of dollars from his own employer? Like, what makes someone snap like that? Well, think about it this way. He goes to work every day at Loomis, and he oversees the vault, which means he loads millions of dollars in and out of that vault. I mean, he is surrounded by money. Like, it's just staring at him in the face. Yet, in his personal life, he can barely pay his bills. He's working sometimes 70, 80 hours a week for $8.15 an hour. Imagine that. Imagine you're broke, struggling to get by, and you have to stare at stacks and stacks of cash all day. Like, how would you feel? So, after years of being in this situation, he started to resent his life, and he started to resent his marriage, until he started working with Kelly. And he really started crushing on her. Like, he's liked her forever. Like, they used to go to school together. And Kelly, she was really pushing him to do this heist with her. So he does it, thinking it'll impress her. So basically, he did all this because he was broke and he was trying to clap cheeks. And because of that, there is now a hitman after him, trying to unalive him. But luckily for him, when Chambers calls the hitman and tells him exactly where to find David, the FBI has his phones tapped, and they're listening in. And now they know exactly where to find David. So the feds go straight to Mexico, and they catch David, and boom, they arrest him. Here's his mugshot. Then, the next day, they go and arrest Chambers. Here's his mugshot. Then they arrest Chambers' wife. Here's her mugshot. And of course, they arrest Kelly. Here's her mugshot. In fact, they arrest a bunch of people involved in this. In total, about 20 people were arrested in connection with this heist. But David gets sentenced to a little over 7 years in prison, and Chambers, he's sentenced to 11 years in prison, while his wife gets 7 years in prison, and Kelly gets 6 years in prison. And they all have to pay back the money they stole. But allegedly, to this day, $2 million of that heist money is still missing. Like, they never found it, so I guess it's still out there. So this guy, let's call him G.I. Joe, because that's what people call him. And G.I. Joe is a police officer, and one day he's patrolling around this abandoned factory when he spots 3 suspicious-looking people. 2 white guys and a black guy. And he goes to check them out, and he starts following them, and suddenly, bang, he gets shot in the chest. He's unalived. So then a huge manhunt begins. Dogs and helicopters and the FBI and the US Marshal Service. Over 400 law enforcement are all looking for these 3 mysterious guys who shot G.I. Joe. And this small town is devastated. I mean, G.I. Joe was really well loved. He had a good reputation in the community. But most importantly, he was the leader of this youth program, a program that encourages young adults to eventually go into law enforcement, the Explorer Post program. And he loved this program. I mean, it was everything to him. And the youth, they all loved him too.
He truly did care about his community. He was always involved with community events, village events, etc.
So if the community loved him so much, who were these 3 random guys who suddenly decided to unalive G.I. Joe? All right, before we answer that, let's talk about Joe for a minute, because he's an interesting guy. Now, after he dies, they release his personal records. And let's just say there's a whole other side of him that the community didn't know about. For example, he's kind of a drunk. Like one day, he gets so drunk that he passes out in his truck on the shoulder of the highway. And another officer finds him, and G.I. Joe is so drunk that the officer can't even wake him up. So then a detective from his town has to take him home, and they have to have his truck towed. And the next morning, G.I. Joe, he can't remember any of this. So he calls and reports his truck as stolen. And the detective who dropped him off at home has to be like, yo, you were drunk, bro, so we had to tow your truck. So anyway, G.I. Joe is that kind of guy. And as the years go by, G.I. Joe's behavior, it only gets crazier. Like he's showing up to work late, or he just doesn't even show up at all. He gets suspended a number of times, and like eventually his boss has to demote him from commander down to sergeant, because I guess he got mad one day and threatened to shoot a dispatcher. Also, a woman who works under his command in the police department, she files a lawsuit against him for sexual misconduct. Then, a few years after that, someone submits an anonymous letter to the mayor of the town on behalf of some of the members of the police department. Basically, these unnamed police department employees, they all accuse G.I. Joe of all kinds of stuff. Sexual harassment, being constantly thrown out of places for being too drunk, taking his family on vacation in the police squad car, pressuring his subordinates to hook up with him, groping women's boobs at the company Christmas party. This dude is a menace. But despite all that, G.I. Joe still doesn't get fired. And he continues his life still working as a police officer, still working as the head of the Explorer Post program. Now, he's been an officer for several decades now. But then, at some point, G.I. Joe, he's put in all these years of work into the force. And he's put in all these years of hard work for the youths. And I guess he starts feeling entitled. And he feels he isn't getting a fair return. And to be honest, I don't really know what motivates him to do this next thing he's about to do. But one day, he starts stealing money from the Explorer Post program. I guess there's like a bank account for the program, and he treats that bank account like it's his own personal bank account, and he just like spends money from it on random shit, like he'll buy himself like Starbucks, which is not that big of a deal, but he also pays for his gym membership, his travel expenses, his mortgage, his kids' college. He even pays for adult websites with this money. What the hell kind of person uses funds from the youth program to subscribe to corn sites? Come on, G.I. Joe. But anyway, he embezzles all this money from the youth program for almost 7 years. And like his wife and his adult son are apparently all involved in this scam too, because they're getting some of the money. But no one outside this seems to notice that this crime is even going on. Until one day, this new administrator starts working for the town. Her name's Anne. And Anne, she's overseeing the budgets and the funds. And unlike G.I. Joe, she's really good at her job and not corrupt. And she starts doing an audit of the Explorer program. And eventually, Anne starts asking G.I. Joe to provide accounting and inventory for this program. I mean, she wants to see where all that money is going. And of course, G.I. Joe panics. I mean, he doesn't know what to do. I mean, if she finds out he's been stealing from the youth program, his life, his reputation, and his career, they're all ruined. So he starts kicking around all kinds of ideas about how to fix this. I mean, he considers setting Ann up and arresting her for a DUI. He considers planting drugs on her, like maybe that will get her fired. He even contacts a member of a local motorcycle gang, and he tries to get him to unalive her. But I guess that idea falls through. And then, finally, G.I. Joe comes up with what he feels is a solid plan. A plan to make sure all this goes away and that his reputation stays intact. A plan to make sure no one will find out about his embezzlement or any other crimes. And most importantly, a plan that will make sure that his family won't be accused of being involved in any of the crimes he's done. And then, one morning, he puts this plan into motion. He wakes up and he heads out toward the Explorer Post, where he's supposed to be finishing an equipment inventory for Ann. But instead of stopping there, he just keeps driving. And he drives all the way to this abandoned cement factory. Once he's there, he radios to dispatch, and he tells them he sees 3 suspicious men there. 2 white guys and a black guy. And that they're looking pretty shady. Here's the thing though, G.I. Joe doesn't see anyone there. He's making it all up. And then he tells the dispatch that the suspects have run away toward the swamp, and that he's gonna follow them, and that they need to send backup. And so dispatch listens, and they send some officers out his way. Then G.I. Joe, he takes his pew-pew, and he points it at his chest, and he fires. Bam! But the bullet is stopped by his bulletproof vest. Then he tries again. This time he makes sure to move his bulletproof vest out of the way. And bang! He succeeds. He unalives himself. And other officers have arrived on the scene, and they investigate, and of course, they think these 3 mysterious men, 2 white guys and a black guy, that they unalived him and got away. Because that's what G.I. Joe wanted them to think. He staged the area to make it look like there was a struggle and everything. But after a thorough 2-month investigation, police finally figure out that there were no mysterious men. G.I. Joe made it all up.
This extensive investigation has concluded with an overwhelming amount of evidence that Glinowitz's death was a carefully staged suicide.
So, I guess his plan didn't work, and now everyone knows that maybe he wasn't as good of a guy as everyone in the community once thought. And here's what he looked like in real life. Bro is about to get his whole family in trouble. Now this kid, his name is Bryce, and he's 17. And one night, he's out driving around, and at some point during the night, Bryce had smoked a little Zaza. And so he's cruising around, feeling good, and he's speeding, and that is when this guy spots him, who we'll just call Officer. So Officer sees him, and he pulls out, and Bryce notices the red and blue lights flashing behind him, and he's like, oh, damn it, I'm getting pulled over. And so he pulls over, and Officer goes to his car, and he starts telling him what's going on.
Here's my stop. You're going 73 and 55.
Any kind of drugs or alcohol or anything in the car?
No.
And, no big deal, just a speeding ticket. But then, Officer notices an odor coming from inside the car. He smells that Zaza Bryce has been smoking, which means Bryce is underage and driving under the influence. And right then, bam, another car pulls up near them. And driving this car is this woman, who we'll just call Mom, because she's Bryce's mom. And apparently Mom was at a family event nearby, so she drove over to see why her son was being pulled over. An officer notices when Mom pulls up.
Can I help you with something?
It's my son.
Okay, do you have the insurance?
I don't have it on me right now. How fast can you
It's going 73 and a 55. And it smells like weed in the car. You know he smokes weed?
It doesn't everybody. I don't know about it. So
Okay.
there's stuff in his car is what you're telling me?
That's what it looks like.
You're going to get him out and look through the car?
I'm going to search the vehicle.
Okay, so Officer deals with Mom, and then he goes to search Bryce's car. And that is when shit starts to get crazy.
Hop out for me, bud.
Don't get out of the car. Don't get out of the car.
Hop out of the car. Why? Get out of the car.
Get out of the car.
Because it smells like weed in the car and they're shaking the car. If you don't move, you are going to get arrested too, ma'am. If you don't move, you need to leave my stop now. You need to leave my stop.
Pull me over for speeding. That's
Yeah,
You need to leave my stop now.
You can arrest
Get back in your car and leave.
I'm gonna be here
I'm
with my
telling you right
17-year-old
now.
son.
All right,
I will be here with my. He's pulling. He is pushing me.
You're under arrest.
Get on video.
Nope,
Get
you're
on
under
video.
arrest.
Get on video.
You're under arrest.
Get off.
Get on the
What?
ground.
Are you kidding me?
Nope,
Get on
I'm not kidding you. I told you to stop.
Get it on video, Bryce. Get on video. Are you kidding me right now? Get off of me.
And so he's trying to arrest her and they fight, and then Bryce kind of steps in and tries to intervene, and he gets too close to the officer, and it becomes this whole chaotic scene.
Did nothing. I stopped for my 17-year-old.
Stand up.
Get off! Get off!
You want to go to jail too?
My
hands are up. My hands are up. My hands are up.
Get off of us! Who are you?
Turn around.
What is wrong with you?
My hands are up. I haven't done anything. I told you. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. You're under arrest.
Help! Hands are up. Help!
Stop. Get the, I told you to stop. Hands are up. What the f*** is doing? If you don't get out of my face, what? You're going to get tased. What am I doing? Stop. What am I doing?
Oh my God!
You're going to get tased.
But then, if you listen closely, you can hear Bryce say something that only someone who had smoked a lot of Zaza would say.
Brian!
I already have him on the way, bud.
And funny enough, Bryce does call the police, and you can hear him in the video calling the police on the police.
There's a police that's illegally arresting my mother for nothing. She did nothing wrong.
Stop.
There's a sheriff.
Put your other hand behind your back.
My mother for nothing.
Put your other hand behind your back.
He is pushing me down!
And so Bryce gets all mad and he tries to interfere, and he's getting up in the officer's face, trying to grab his arm.
She can't breathe. Touch me again, you're gonna get tased. She can't breathe. Touch me again. She can't breathe. You're gonna get tased. I'm telling you right now.
I'm not touching you, am I?
Back up.
No.
I can't breathe.
Back
What
up.
am I doing illegal?
Back up.
What am I doing illegal? Let her breathe. Officer's not letting my mom breathe right now.
Help me.
Really?
Help, please.
Stop.
Arrest. Hey, put your hand behind your back.
Put your hand behind your back.
Put your hand behind your back, please. For me, mother.
I'm not gonna tell you again.
What did she do wrong? What did she do wrong, sir? What did she do wrong to be slammed on the ground? Tell me. Tell me, please. Tell me. Hands are up.
Behind your back.
Hands are up.
Hands behind your back.
Hands are up.
And bam, bro ends up getting arrested too. And while he's being detained, if you pause the body cam footage, you can see Mom is already out in the middle of the road in handcuffs trying to walk away. And at one point, they're both on their knees screaming for help.
On your knees. Get out. Somebody record it. Somebody record it. Record it, please.
Then, if you can believe it, another family member shows up, like out of nowhere. And it looks like they might try to intervene too. I mean, you could see them in the footage here, and you can hear the officer yelling at them.
Stay back.
And so, after all this madness, minutes later, other officers show up, and they finally get this crazy situation under control. And they put Bryce in the back of the police car, and bro is just talking trash the whole way.
So what have I done wrong? Besides speeding.
Get in the car.
I know, I am gently.
Get in the car.
You can be polite, you're a bitch.
Move your foot. Jesus Christ.
And of course, when they put Mom in the car, she's still yapping too.
Really small.
Hope you enjoy jail tonight.
Maybe get better shape, badass.
Oh, but it doesn't stop there, because once they clean up the scene, Mom is still handcuffed in the back of the police car. So when Officer gets in to take her back to the station, she just vomits this amazing amount of trash talk to him.
I have so many connections, you have no idea what you just said, sir. We have that all on video. It's going on everything.
I have it on video too, ma'am.
That is great.
So,
Because you told me I couldn't stay with my 17-year-old son.
You're right.
And then you forced me on the ground.
we're not gonna sit here and argue, ma'am.
Your dog is on the line. You don't know my connections. It's going on. It's
Okay.
going down.
Okay.
I will be,
That's perfectly fine.
I hope your kids, I hope your wife, I hope they all get because you are a Karma is a How dare you treat me and my son that way? Yeah. It's all fun and games to you, isn't it?
Not really. Is your name Jessica?
You!
Okay.
Mother ass, I'm gonna blow this up on you.
Okay.
Why? You don't know who you with.
Okay.
But I take back the bruises you left on the you almost killed me. I'm on the ground telling you I couldn't breathe, and you still got your knee in my back. I couldn't breathe. Who the do you think you are? You don't even know what you did. What's your name, fat ass?
My name.
Fat ass? Is that it? That that looks about right. The little fat ass little that sounds right. That's it. You just lost your job. Watch. You don't know who I know around here. Fat ass motherfucker with a small blow this shit up.
Listen, you have the right to remain silent.
And so, funny thing, as it turns out, I guess Mom doesn't have any connections and doesn't really know anyone with influence because ultimately, bam, officer throws her in jail. Here's her mugshot. Or at least I think this is her mugshot. This is what I could find. And from what I read, Mom pleads guilty and she gets probation and community service. Nothing too crazy. Meanwhile, Bryce, I actually couldn't find anything on Bryce. Probably because he's a minor, so he probably didn't get in that much trouble. Anyway, cool family. And a huge shout out to Leonardo.ai for sponsoring this video. If you make videos and you want to make really badass art for those videos, like this or like this, like look at how cool that is. Sign up for Leonardo.ai. So this girl, her name's Ellie, and she's 18, and Ellie is about to be in big trouble. Cause one day, she's hanging out with her boyfriend, and they're chilling, watching movies, playing video games or whatever, and they're also allegedly drinking and smoking a little Zaza. But then, boyfriend leaves for work, and Ellie, even though she's a bit tipsy, she decides it's the perfect time to go to Target and I guess do some Christmas shopping. So she grabs a bottle of vodka and a little Zaza and she gets into her SUV and she heads over to Target. And as she gets there, she's listening to music, having a good time, and she swerves into the parking lot and skirt, she skids into a parking spot. And then she gets out and she stumbles into Target. Here's the thing though. When she pulled into the parking lot, people saw her swerving around and acting a bit drunk. So a couple of them contacted police and reported her. Then, about an hour later, police show up to Target. And there, they find Ellie in the parking lot, sitting in her car.
Sorry, hello? Hi, miss. I'm Officer Costa with Crystal Lake Police Department. We're just talking to you because we got a couple complaints that you might have been swerving on the road.
And so she gets out and they're like, we heard you were swerving. And she's like, oh, I was just messing with my music. But the officers are thinking, that's bullshit. And they ask for her ID. So she goes back into the car to get her ID. And one officer follows her to the front seat. And she shines her flashlight on what Ellie's doing. And that officer spots a bottle of vodka halfway under the front seat. But she doesn't say anything yet. Instead, she brings Ellie back and they question her a bit, and Ellie gives them normal answers like, oh, I'm just Christmas shopping. But then the officer calls her out.
We have a little bit of a problem, okay? So I'm gonna give you an opportunity to be honest with me, okay? Because when you opened your door, I saw the bottle of vodka.
And so Ellie is in trouble. And the officer's like, hey, stand over there while we search your vehicle. And Ellie's thinking, oh, shit. If they search my car, then they'll find the vodka and maybe some of that Zaza, and I'm gonna be fucked. So what does she do? She blurts out the first thing that comes to mind.
You don't have the warrant to do that. Actually, I have probable cause because I observed alcohol.
But see, Ellie's not gonna give up. She really doesn't want them searching her car. So she starts to get a little aggressive.
Unfortunately,
no, I have a right to not let you search my car.
We're not doing this.
I have a right to not let you search my car.
Ellie.
Oh, but Ellie does not stop. Even when one of the other officers is like, we can see the Zaza right through the window. Doesn't matter. Ellie's convinced she's right, and she is ready to die on this hill. And to the officer's credit, they're actually really patient with her.
These are your choices. You can go stand by that squad car with these two gentlemen, okay? That's your first choice. If you do not want to do that, your second choice is I'm going to put you in handcuffs, okay? So, which do you choose?
You can't search my car without a warrant.
And so, boom, they handcuff her. And Ellie, she doesn't like this at all.
Please don't handcuff me. I'll go with them to the car. I'll go with them to the car right now.
Ellie.
Please don't handcuff me.
Ellie.
We already spoke about this. We gave you the option.
Don't handcuff me. I'll go to the car with them right now. Please.
You have a hand?
I'll go to the car with them right now. Please don't handcuff me.
We're not going to do this.
Ellie, stop. You got her?
I can't be handcuffed. Please, I'm trying to walk.
Ellie,
I can't be handcuffed.
Stop.
I can't be handcuffed.
Stop it.
Take me out of the Take me out of the handcuffs.
So then they get her into the back of the police car, and here she's really starting to lose control.
Take a deep breath. Listen to me.
Can you please take the handcuffs off?
You have to listen to me.
Ellie, listen to me.
Stop talking.
Take a deep breath right now.
Stop talking.
Take a deep breath.
And it takes a bit of work, but yeah, it seems like she's finally about to calm down. But then she starts crying, and like, you almost feel sorry for her.
Ellie, take a deep breath for me. Take one right now.
And then when that doesn't work, she starts trying to negotiate.
I'll sit here if you take off the handcuffs.
Okay.
If not, I'll run out.
He can buckle me up if you take off the handcuffs, please. He can't buckle me if not.
But like, yeah, here you can see her trying to use her leg to try and keep them from buckling her in. And so yeah, as you can see, she really doesn't calm down. Like, she gets even more out of control pretty quickly. And during all this, I guess her vape falls out of her pocket and the officer needs to confiscate it.
I need to take the vape.
No, you can't.
Okay, come on.
You can't. Then
Listen,
give me $27 because I just paid all my. I paid.
I'm gonna put it in your car. Okay.
You're gonna put it in my car.
I'm gonna put it in your car right now. Okay.
Can I hit it first?
No, you can't.
No.
And this whole vape situation really sets her off.
Please put it in my car. I just paid $27 for that, and I need that. Please put it in my car.
These kids and their vapes. But anyway, so they're trying to pat her down and search her, and she really starts flipping out, and the officers, they can't control her. So they're forced to put her in what's called the wrap, which is a full body restraint. It's like handcuffs for your whole body. Here's a picture of someone they put in a wrap, and as you can see, there is no way anyone is getting out of that. So they're trying to put her in this wrap, and she's like kicking them and fighting the whole way.
Stop trying to bite.
Ellie, stop digging your fingernails into my hands.
But then finally, they get her in the wrap.
Shut the f***. No, I can't go in the ambulance. I will not. In my head, I can't go in an ambulance. If you call my sister right when you get the...
Hey, Ellie.
I can't go in an ambulance. My stomach hurts. Stop. Let go of my stomach.
So now she's in the wrap, and they throw her in the back of the cop car again, but Ellie has only got one thing on her mind.
Who has my vape? Who has my vape? Who has my vape? Who has my vape? Who is gonna answer? Who has my vape?
And from this point on, like without her vape, she just completely loses it. And so they end up taking her back to the police station, and at this point, they've wrapped her entire head. Like, they must be really tired of listening to her. But they throw her in a holding cell, and then she finds out she's gonna have to stay there overnight.
If my parents bail me out tonight, if they bring me to the judge.
No, you don't have a bail until the judge sets it. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
No, I won't!
You'll be fine. It's just this right now.
And at some point, you almost have to stop and think, like, why doesn't she understand that this isn't gonna go her way?
It's gonna be okay.
I can't be here tonight. It's not gonna be okay. You don't understand.
So anyway, Ellie's charged with a DUI and battery of an officer and a bunch of other stuff, and she spends 6 days in jail, and ultimately she takes a plea deal and she gets 2 years probation and a small fine. And by the way, here's her mugshot. And poor Ellie, we still, to this day, don't know if she ever got her vape back. So these turds, one day they're hanging out at the local mall, causing trouble and just being turds. Then, boom, they get kicked out. But they're not done messing around. So they go to a nearby Kroger and they all start causing a ruckus in there, being loud, breaking wine bottles, and just being awful. And at some point, the Kroger employees notice all this and they call the police. Minutes later, some police officers show up and they go to confront them, politely.
Y'all was breaking stuff, y'all done broke wine bottles. It's on camera, they done caught y'all breaking stuff. Where y'all parents?
So there's a little bit of back and forth between them and the officers tell them to leave the store. But these guys are just not taking this seriously.
Time to leave. Get up.
up, man. Time to go.
Stop screaming. I heard you.
That way. Out. Out. Let's go.
Oh, tie my shoe.
I don't worry about it. I'm not worried about your shoe. You can tie that outside. Let's go.
Yeah, they have no respect for anyone. Like, one of the teens gets into it with this woman who looks like a customer on the way out.
You ain't working nowhere. You ain't working nowhere.
Let's go.
You ain't working nowhere.
Let's go. Time to go.
You ain't working nowhere.
Are you his parent?
I'm not his parent.
All right, then let's go.
Yeah, his parent. Yeah.
Let's go.
Now, this kid in particular, we'll call him Little Brother. And Little Brother is the biggest problem here. He just isn't listening. And this is where things really start to go south.
I'm going to put you in handcuffs in a minute. Do you understand that? Excuse me, he's going to listen or he's going to go in handcuffs. Now let's go.
I'm not even going down the ball. I'm finna walk up.
I'm trying to get my ball. No, put your hand behind your back.
I'm trying to get my ball.
Put your hand behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Now. Put your hands behind your back. No, you're not listening to me.
What's wrong with you?
I gave you order.
Get the off me. What's wrong with you?
Oh, but it gets worse, because bro doesn't give up. In fact, he now thinks it's the appropriate time to just run, like he's gonna get away. Now, if you didn't catch that because it's hard to see, I guess people in the store are really sick of these guys' because if you slow down the footage of him running, you can see that a bystander steps in out of nowhere and kaboom! He body checks this kid. Shout out to that bystander. Anyway, pow! They arrest Little Brother. Or at least they try.
Get off of me, we're going to cuff too.
It's not meant to be gentle.
I mean, he's not wrong. Handcuffs definitely aren't meant to be gentle. Now, Little Brother actually has an older brother there with him. This kid, who we'll call Big Brother. Same guy who was asleep on the couch. Now, if you pause the video of Little Brother's arrest, you can see Big Brother interfering. Like that's his hand grabbing the officer's arm here. Now, obviously, you're not supposed to do that, and this is definitely gonna be a problem in a bit. So anyway, they finally arrest the Little Brother. But Big Brother still got his hands all up in the situation.
Watch out! He's going right up. Handcuffs on, man. Let go.
Come here.
Let go. Well, you gotta get your goddamn hands off. Hey.
So police escort Little Brother out. But for some reason, I guess he just wants to go to jail, Big Brother refuses to leave.
We ain't shopping anymore, so you can turn around and leave the store right now. Hey, where's your phone then?
I'm going to get it.
Where is it? We can help you find it. Look, when I'm walking around looking at merchandise right now.
I don't want to handcuffs.
You should be in handcuffs right now for assaulting my officer back there, okay? I'm giving you a chance to get your phone. If you're not going to get your phone, I'm going to take you outside and handcuff. Go, come on.
Meanwhile, Little Brother is not going out without a fight.
I'm not getting in that car.
Okay. All right.
Y'all, please call y'all.
If he is that
I am the star. Oh, shit.
Bro literally says, can y'all talk to me first? Isn't that what they were trying to do the whole time before he decided it was a good idea to run from the police?
Back off.
Back off.
Get in the car.
You either get in or I'm throwing you in. You got 1 minute.
Move your legs.
Get all the way in.
These handcuffs, man. Can you please?
We'll adjust them once you're in. Get in.
Okay, you cannot.
Get in.
You cannot push me.
Get in.
I can't. The buckler's behind me, sir. I was trying to, sir. What the that hurt? Ah, my.
Now they do eventually get him in the car, but this isn't over yet, because Big Brother is about to be a problem. Now at this point, most of these guys have left. A couple of them left at the beginning when the officers were escorting them out. And they do eventually get Big Brother and 2 of his friends to leave the area. But then, for some stupid reason, these 3 insist on coming back to Kroger.
Stop right there. You're not coming any closer. Stop. Stop.
The officer said we can come over here.
go that way now, or I'm gonna put all three of you in handcuffs and you can join him in the car.
Now, just to be clear, this could all end right now. Like, it would be over if they would just leave. Like, they've been trespassed. There's no reason for them to hang around.
All right, turn around, put your ass in your back. Nope, turn around, put your ass in your back.
God, like, what the f***? Tighten up, I'm standing here. You can get out my face.
Boss man, go ahead and put your ladder down for me.
Stand up. If I'm just sitting there playing...
Behind your back. You're going to be under arrest, too.
What the f*** I do?
Battery on Leo.
Battery on the... Why I didn't touch nobody?
Yeah, you did.
Now, he says, I didn't touch nobody. But, as we all saw, he did, in fact, touch somebody. He had his hands all over those officers during that arrest, which is a crime. And the most frustrating part is that he could have gotten away with it if he had just walked away when they asked him to leave. Why didn't he just walk away?
Let him handcuff you. Don't do this.
Man, what the f*** you mean I didn't touch no...
You want to get tased? Put your hand behind your back.
Stop. I got the handcuffs off me. Thinking, cuz.
And I just want to point out that he's apparently struggling so hard during this arrest that he drops a whole pack of Uno cards. You can pause the footage and you can see it. Like, bro was trying to find his Uno reverse card to get out of this. Anyway, Big Brother is still mad, even when they put him in the police car.
Find that.
Whoa, hello there.
I'm under arrest.
To buy something.
Get in the car.
Goodbye, friend. Come back.
Take the badges off, cuz.
Then, for some reason, it's not actually clear to me from the footage, they arrest the girl that's with them too. She's apparently their sister. Cool family. So, what happened to them afterwards? Well, I'm pretty sure they're all minors, so at the end of the day, they probably won't get in too much trouble. Little probation, little community service probably. Now, I couldn't find any official information on them, like what happened to them after all this, but I'm pretty sure like they cleaned up their act and they all went and got an education. They went and got doctorates from Yale. Probably, right? So one morning, this woman is in the driveway and she's beating up her boyfriend. Now the woman, her name's Alicia. She's 34, she's from Wisconsin, and she used to be a military police officer. Now Alicia has a boyfriend, who we'll just call boyfriend. And that morning, I guess they get into a fight and Alicia starts to get violent. And he's in the driveway and she picks up some rocks and she sticks them between her fingers like they're brass knuckles and she starts trying to punch him. And I guess she also starts threatening to unalive his whole family. And this is allegedly not the first time she's threatened to do this. But here's the thing about Alicia. She's a mom of 3 little kids. And she and the 3 little kids are all living at boyfriend's house right now. But she's been acting nutty for so long, at this point, boyfriend, he's scared of her. So I guess after the fight, he low-key calls Alicia's kids fathers. Both of them, because there's more than one. And he tells them that she's crazy and that he's worried about those kids. So each of the kids' fathers, separately, they call the police. And they're like, Alicia's crazy. Go over there and take my kids away from her. Meanwhile, I guess, Alicia, boyfriend, and the kids, they all had plans to take the boat out on the lake for the day. So they all go out to the lake. And eventually, police show up. And they're looking to take Alicia's kids.
Sit down and talk. I'm telling you to sit down and talk right now.
My lawyer
Where's
said that I get them until the date that is on my phone.
And so Alicia calls her lawyer.
I'm calling my lawyer.
That's fine. But we're going to take the kids.
No, you're
now.
not.
Yes, we are.
No, you're not. I'm supposed to let my kids go with these random cops to show up on a phone?
Alicia,
You're
stop
my
swearing.
lawyer. Come on, please. Tell me what to do.
And finally, police are just fed up with her stalling, so they're just gonna take the kids.
Okay, well, they're going to come with us now, and then you can
They're
see.
not
Yes.
going with you now. No,
Okay.
it's not.
Alicia, if you obstruct and resist us, we're going to place you in handcuffs in front of your children. You don't want that.
So the officers board the boat and they round up all the kids, and Alicia starts turning into a psychopath about the officer getting a name wrong.
Maybe you should know what the you're gonna say before the you come here. Come in here saying the wrong name of the dad.
Yeah,
You
sorry.
piece of cop.
Sorry I misspoke, Alicia.
She seems nice. So anyway, police take the kids away. Then, officers go to boyfriend's home with Alicia to collect some of the kids' belongings, their clothes and stuff. So they start collecting the kids' stuff. And while they're there, they low-key pull boyfriend aside and they talk to him, away from Alicia. And this is when he really starts opening up about how he feels about all this.
You gotta get out of here, man.
Yeah, she's gotta go. She's destroying my house. I'm down 2 TVs and a bunch of...
Destroying your house?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's broken glass in the bedroom.
Has she hit you?
Yeah.
When did she hit you?
Yesterday morning. There's rocks in the driveway.
But if there's a problem here, we can't leave you with that either.
Yeah, I can't.
Does she have somewhere she can go? One of these vehicles hers?
Yes, but she won't leave.
She won't. So you want her out?
Yes.
We can get her out here for you. If that's what you want, we can have her removed.
But then she's going to come back, and she's threatened to call my family at least 12 times.
So then, boyfriend suggests to her that she should leave. And to be fair, he seems polite about it.
Just go home, like your dad said.
While she is in the bathroom at this point, and I guess she tries to kick his dog?
Don't kick my dog!
Dad, I'm here. I can hear you.
Do not kick
I am talking to my dad for a second.
Then talk. I'm gonna stand right here while you do it. Because of what you just did, that's not going to happen.
Because I scurried away and got back from him.
You were kicking.
The dog was in my face.
And at this point, the officer is just done with her shit. He's like, you need to get whatever stuff of yours you can gather, and you need to get the hell out of boyfriend's house now.
What were my options?
You can gather up the stuff you need for tonight, and you can go, and Ted will make arrangements to get the rest of your stuff
Why
to you.
can't Ted and I go through everything together and you guys just stand there?
Because we don't have all night to do that. You're gonna have to make other arrangements if you have that much stuff. So your options are, you get what you need and go, or we're going to take you. And I don't want to take you.
So then Alicia starts gathering her stuff to leave for the night. But now she's mad at boyfriend, I guess for kicking her out. So she decides she's gonna try and take him down with her, get him in trouble too. So she starts asking boyfriend about some Zaza.
Am I allowed to take any of the or no?
Well, you're not allowed to possess it, so no.
So she's trying to get boyfriend in trouble by talking about his Zaza in front of police because Zaza possession is not legal in Wisconsin.
Well, here, come on, I'll show you.
I'm not worried about it. Get your stuff.
No, I'm getting half my.
You're not taking it with you.
Well, actually, technically, it's not mine though, so.
It doesn't matter whose it is. You can't legally possess it.
Now, luckily for boyfriend, the officers are cool. They don't care about his Zaza. They just want to get her out of the house.
We're not worried about that today. You need the necessities. Ma'am, I just gave you your options. You get your necessities and leave on your own.
I'm trying to find them. I lived here for over a year. I'm looking for my stuff.
None of your necessities are down here. It's under construction.
So eventually she goes back into the bedroom to pack up some more of her stuff. And this is when Alicia starts to lose it and fight with boyfriend.
Tubs, Ted. We bought tubs. Like with the f***ing lid on
Ma'am,
it.
you need to stop yelling.
Is he retarded or he doesn't understand?
We
bought
ma'am,
tubs. We bought tubs.
This is your last chance. If you continue to yell and swear, you are going to go into custody. I've had enough.
Swearing?
Yes, I've had enough. Get your stuff and let's go.
I'm getting my f***ing stuff. I'm allowed to swear.
You are not.
Freedom of speech.
This close.
Yeah.
Get your stuff. Get your stuff and
I'm
let's
getting
go.
my stuff. Quit telling me to do it.
But Alicia just doesn't listen, and she's stalling, she's dragging her feet, and officers just had enough.
You don't get in trouble for all the he has, but I get in trouble. That's so funny. That's so typical of you guys.
Ma'am, if I wanted you to be in trouble, I'd have took you to jail a long time ago. You're trying my patience.
Yeah.
Get your stuff and let's go.
Do you not see me getting my stuff?
I told you to get your necessities.
And I'm getting my... You see my necessities?
That's not necessary.
My medicine, my stuff from the military?
Now, here's the most satisfying part of this whole thing. It's also the part that I can't really show you because it's a little violent. But, boom, officers try and detain Alicia, but she puts up one hell of a fight. Like, I can't show you the video, but here's a screenshot of it, and you can see she's on the ground hitting and kicking them, and here's another screenshot, and here's another. But then, in the most satisfying moment of this whole thing, pow, the officer tases the shit out of her. Here's a screenshot of her getting tased. Yeah, go ahead and laugh at her, it's okay. And like, yeah, I know, I clowned on her a lot in this video, which I try not to do too much of, because, look, one, it's a little mean, and two, people commit crimes for all kinds of reasons that I'll never understand, and I won't pretend to understand what motivates people to do some of the things they do. But I just want to point this out. She must have messed up really bad when both of her baby's daddies and her current boyfriend all got together and secretly called the police on her. They were like, hey, let's put our differences aside and come together like the fucking Justice League and get Alicia away from these kids. But anyway, after all that, bam, they finally arrest her. And I don't have a mugshot, but here's a picture of her in real life. I guess this is from her time in the military. And she's charged with battery on an officer, disorderly conduct, and domestic abuse. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any updates on her after that. And as far as her 3 kids go, the officer who took them, he took them to get ice cream while they waited on another guardian to come pick them up.
Look what I got.
Oh, yum. All right, cool.
So, that's nice. I hope they're okay. And a huge shout out to Leonardo.ai for sponsoring this video. If you want to make really cool art for your videos or just for your life, like this or like this, then sign up for Leonardo.ai. One night, this woman, her name's Ellie, she goes out with some friends. And while she's out, she meets this guy, Jordan. And they're all drinking and they're having a good time. And by the end of the night, Jordan ends up taking Ellie home. Except that Jordan doesn't actually take her home. He takes her somewhere else, somewhere she doesn't recognize. And there is where he SAs her. But unfortunately, she doesn't report it to police. She says she's too afraid. 2 months later, Jordan shows up one night to her apartment. And for some reason, she lets him in. And there is where he pulls a knife on her and he beats her up and he SAs her again. But this time, after he leaves, she does go and report it to police. And luckily, she has proof. Crazy enough, she has screenshots from Jordan's Snapchat messages, where he openly admits that he SA'd her. So police, they eventually go and arrest Jordan. But then he gets out on bail. And one night, while he's out on bail, he breaks into Ellie's house and he SAs her again. So she tells police and police go and they arrest him again. And they throw him in jail and he's there for about 10 weeks before they ultimately let him go due to lack of evidence. Now, since Ellie has the police's ear, she feels it's the right time to confess something else to them. She goes and tells them about another separate incident that happened to her. Years before, back when Ellie was 12, she had met this much older guy at sort of a family gathering, and his name is Mo. So she and Mo, they become friends, and Mo eventually starts trafficking her, taking her from place to place and forcing her to do horrible things that I won't get into. And Ellie wasn't the only one. She says Mo has done this to tons of other girls, at least 60 other girls in fact, and he's involved in some kind of larger trafficking ring. And so Mo trafficking Ellie, this goes on for years, from the time she's 12 and to when she's well into her teens. And of course, Ellie has Snapchat messages to prove all of this too. So she shows all these messages to police. So police see this and they fear for Ellie's safety. So they put her in a hotel so that none of the traffickers she just outed can find her. Well, unfortunately for her, some of the traffickers she outed eventually do end up finding her. And they order her to get on a train and go to Blackpool immediately. So she does. And in Blackpool, she meets up with Mo, the original trafficker. And Mo ends up taking her to 4 different hotels where she is SA'd multiple times by a bunch of different men. Now police, they eventually notice Ellie's missing. And they go to Blackpool and they find her and they bring her back to the original hotel. They also eventually arrest Mo and they throw him in jail. 2 weeks later, police take Ellie back to Blackpool. And they're like, okay, show us where the traffickers took you. Let's retrace all your steps so we can finally bust this trafficking ring. And Ellie's like, alright. So they spend 2 days driving her around town. And Ellie points out a few places to them, but the locations she's pointing to and the details she's giving them are suddenly really vague.
Was it on that route that you took us on, or was it somewhere else? I don't know. Not sure.
And by the end of this trip, police have no more information than when they started. And it's at this point that they look at Ellie and they start to get suspicious. So they go and they search Ellie's phone. And they find that, yeah, she actually had been at a hotel in Blackpool. But it's a hotel that she herself booked, which doesn't line up with her trafficking story. They also find CCTV footage of her shopping at various local stores in Blackpool, which also doesn't line up with her trafficking story. And this is when police realized that Ellie hadn't been trafficked at all. She hadn't been SA'd at all. She made it all up. All of it, all the way back to Jordan, the guy who she accused of SAing her 3 different times. Even the Snapchat messages that she would show police as proof, they were all fake. She just made them up herself. She would even go as far as to beat herself up and put marks on herself to show police as proof. And it is all complete bull. And so police are like, all right, this woman is crazy. Let's go arrest her. So they go to arrest her, but suddenly, Ellie is missing. No one knows where she's at. No one can find her. Meanwhile, Ellie has taken a train to Preston, and there, in the town center, she befriends a random, really drunk dude. His name's Oliver. So Ellie and Oliver, they immediately hit it off. And they start flirting, and they kiss a little, and they kind of hook up, and then they exchange numbers, and they part ways. Then Ellie gets on a train, and she goes back home. And police, they show up there, because they've been looking for her. And she tells police that Oliver, the guy she just hooked up with, she tells them that he trafficked her. She claims that some traffickers forced her to go to Preston and meet up with Oliver, and that Oliver took her somewhere where they met up with some other men, and those other men SA'd her. And that then some of those men beat her up. And of course, she has marks all over her, marks that she made herself. So police, they have to go track down Oliver and investigate him, just in case any of these crazy accusations turn out to be true. Regardless, boom, they arrest Ellie, and they charge her with perverting the course of justice. But pretty quickly, Ellie gets out on bail. And once she's out, she's right back to her old tricks. Because one night she goes to a local store and she buys a hammer. And a few days after that, she takes that hammer and bam, she smacks herself with it right across the face. And then she does it again and again and again until her eyes all red and swollen. Then she takes that hammer and smashes her own finger until it's partially severed. And then she goes out to some random field and waits until police, they eventually find her. And of course, she lies and tells them this whole story about how she was trafficked again, and then taken to a house, and then SA'd by a bunch of random men, and then they beat her up. So of course, police, they take her to the hospital because she's all beat up. But once she's discharged from the hospital, she goes home, and she takes pictures of herself all beat up. Then she gets on Facebook and posts those pictures. And she writes a long, detailed post, basically claiming not that she hit herself with a hammer for attention, but that the night before, some gang of Pakistani groomers trafficked her and beat her up. And so then people on the internet see this crazy long post and these horrible pictures, and they have no idea that police had already determined that Ellie just makes all this stuff up. So her friends on Facebook, they see this post and they believe her, and they start sharing it, and her post starts to blow up. People are sharing it over and over again, and it goes viral. And someone starts a Facebook group called Justice for Ellie, and that Facebook group gets 100,000 followers, and they're quickly selling merchandise to help her out with a purple elephant logo that says Justice for Ellie, and there are stickers on cars and on windows and on notebooks, and like everyone around town has one. And people get together and they crowdfund 22,000 pounds, or about 28,000 US dollars, to help pay for the prosecution of this fictitious Pakistani grooming gang that she just made up. The internet is just going wild over this. But here's what's crazy though. Pretty quickly after making that Facebook post, Ellie gets arrested again, this time for breaking her bail. Here's her mugshot. And so she's arrested, and this crazy internet mob starts accusing the police of trying to cover up this whole fictitious trafficking ring, and that they're trying to silence her. And they're like protesting outside the police station, chanting justice for Ellie. Like, it is nuts. All over some shit that she provably made up. Oh, but that's not even the worst part. All the men she accused of SA before they were fully exonerated, Ellie's false accusations destroyed their lives. Jordan went to jail for a while, of course. People found Mo and they destroyed his property and his business was ruined. And he eventually tried to unalive himself. Thank goodness he didn't. While Oliver, he's so devastated, he tries to unalive himself too. And he eventually gets put in a mental hospital. So these dudes have their lives just torn apart. The good news is, eventually, Ellie does get caught and this all goes to trial. And she's found guilty and she's sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. It's a crazy one. Shout out to England. So this woman hates this other woman, and she's about to try to ruin her life by planting illegal substances in her car. So the story actually starts with this woman, Kelly. And Kelly is a volunteer at the local elementary school. She's PTA president, and everyone likes her. But one day, after school, she's at the school, she's volunteering, watching the kids, and one of the kids, this kid, Luke, he's late when lining up with the other students. And he accidentally ends up getting locked out of the school. And Luke gets upset and he starts crying, and he's locked out for around 5 to 8 minutes before eventually someone notices and they let him in. But then this woman shows up, Jill Easter. And Jill Easter is Luke's mom. And she is pissed that Luke accidentally got locked outside. So she goes up to Kelly and she lets her have it. She's screaming and she's yelling and calling her negligent. How could you leave my child locked outside for 5 whole minutes? So Kelly apologizes to Jill Easter and she tells her that Luke was locked out because he didn't line up fast enough and that he was probably slow in getting to the door. And Jill Easter hears this and she thinks Kelly is calling her son mentally slow. So Jill Easter just loses it. She can't let Kelly get away with this. And that is when she starts plotting her revenge. So the next day, Jill Easter shows up to the school to talk to the principal. And she explains what had happened the day before, and she demands that they fire Kelly from her volunteer job. So the school admins investigate, and they see that Kelly did nothing wrong, so they don't fire her. And of course, this just pisses Jill Easter off even more. So she goes and prints flyers that warn people about
Whenever you can, I've got something for you. I see that the business is booming, huh? Come over whenever you can. I've got something for you.
Yo, if you're interested, I've set up a cabinet for a dealer in the bunker. Needs an upgrade though. Maybe hire someone to take over the small island for you. Out.
I was freaking worried. Everything is so fucking cool. Oh my gosh. I'm getting so much more stuff. I'm gonna need more flour. No. Okay. Where am I? I thought it was okay. Whee! Ow.
I'll be honest with you. You've impressed me. To help you out a little more, I'll give you my friend's contact info. What is it this time?
Okay.
What a horrible person Kelly is, and that she should be fired. And then she stands out in front of the school and passes them out to parents. But still, the school doesn't fire Kelly. Then Jill Easter goes and complains to the superintendent, and Kelly still doesn't get fired. Then Jill Easter goes and complains to one of the state boards of California, and Kelly still doesn't get fired. And Jill Easter, she isn't gonna let this slide. She's had enough. She is going to get her revenge one way or another. So she goes and files a police report, including a restraining order, claiming that Kelly is harassing her son and stalking her, and that somehow Kelly tried to unalive her. And since Jill Easter has no proof of any of this, because she's making it all up, the restraining order is ultimately denied. Oh, but she's not done. She then goes and gets her husband, this guy, Kent Easter, who is a high-powered attorney. She gets him to file a civil lawsuit against Kelly. And this lawsuit claims that because Kelly left her son locked outside for 5 minutes, he had been the victim of false imprisonment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And of course, that lawsuit, it goes nowhere. But understandably, all of this conflict is just stressing Kelly out, and she doesn't know what she's gonna do. But then, suddenly, bam, Jill Easter goes silent. No more drama, no more lawsuits, nothing. And months go by, and Kelly has heard nothing more from the Easters. And it seems like all of this harassment has finally stopped. Until almost a year has passed since Luke got locked outside the school for 5 minutes. And then one night, a man makes a phone call to police, and he tells them that he saw Kelly driving dangerously.
I was calling because my daughter's a student at Plaza Vista Elementary School, and I'm concerned one of the parent volunteers there may be using drugs.
And this man also tells them that he saw Kelly driving to the school while on drugs. So police, they go to the school to investigate because that's where she is. She's there volunteering. And they pull Kelly aside and they tell her about the report they got. And they ask her if they can search her car. And Kelly's like, sure, I have nothing to hide. So police go and they open up her car and they search. And guess what they find? A whole lot of drugs. And this shocks everyone. And of course the police, they start to grill Kelly. They get her to do a curbside sobriety test, you know, like where they make you walk the straight line and stuff. And by the way, all this isn't happening in private. No. This is all happening right in the school parking lot, in front of all the students and parents and teachers who are all watching. And poor Kelly is horrified, like her job is on the line. Well, luckily, Kelly passes the sobriety test because she's sober. And police, they start to believe maybe Kelly isn't high. Maybe someone planted those drugs in her car. So detectives, they get on it, and they start investigating who made that call to police. And they track that call to this nearby hotel. And there, they check surveillance footage, and that's where they see Kent Easter on the screen walking into the hotel. And this is just right before that phone call to police was made. So then detectives get a hold of their phone tracking records, and they see that Kent Easter's phone was near Kelly's apartment complex the night before a bunch of drugs just randomly appeared in Kelly's car. Meaning he found out where she lives, snuck over to her apartment complex in the middle of the night, planted drugs in her car, and called the police on her the next day to make it so that she got busted in front of the whole school, hoping to get her fired. But here's where the story gets really crazy. After all this, detectives, they start surveilling the Easters. And then one day, they see a strange man leaving the Easters' home. This man, Gomez. So they pull Gomez over and they question him. And it turns out he's a firefighter who had been smashing with Jill Easter. They were having an affair behind Kent Easter's back. So detectives ask Gomez to wear a wire and then meet up with Jill. And surprisingly, Gomez cooperates and he agrees to do this. So then he meets up with her at a local park, and Gomez doesn't end up getting much information out of her. But he does end up telling her that they should stop seeing each other until the heat on her dies down. And Jill Easter doesn't like this
requires
idea
me
one
town rep
bit,
level
and
2.
she flips out
That's
and
so
she starts
cool.
yelling at him and screaming, and she breaks up with him. And then after that, she randomly starts showing up to his home where his wife is, and she starts confronting his wife, telling her all about the affair that they've been having for the last 2 years. She prints out photos that Gomez had sent to her, and she leaves them in his mailbox for his wife to find. She also sends emails to his wife's work, trying to give the wife's co-workers all the details about her and Gomez's affair. And those emails sometimes include intimate photos that she and Gomez had taken. It's a whole mess. But Jill Easter wants as many people as possible to know that Gomez has been cheating on his wife and that he's a bad person. She's basically doing everything she can to ruin his reputation. And I'm starting to see a pattern here. Anyway, eventually police arrest Jill Easter and Kent Easter for conspiring to plant drugs in Kelly's car, and here's her mugshot, and here's his. And Jill Easter pleads guilty, and she's sentenced to 120 days in jail, and she's disbarred from ever practicing law again. Did I forget to mention she's a lawyer? Well, not anymore. She got disbarred. While Kent Easter gets sentenced to 180 days in jail, and his legal license is suspended. And ultimately, the Easters end up getting a divorce. Womp womp. Couldn't have happened to a nicer couple. Meanwhile, Kelly sues them in civil court, and she's awarded $5.7 million as compensation. I gotta say, $5.7 million for going through this hell, that sounds like it was worth it. Get that money, girl. Good for her. Shout out to Irvine, California.
What?
These beasts are a threat to all of our lands.
No. No. What do you need?
Time. Pick up.
I have to kill you. I will, because I'm a Viking. Hear that? I'm a Viking! It's okay. I won't hurt you.
So this woman, she allegedly starts stalking a guy, and because of that, she might end up a multi-millionaire. Now her name's Fiona, and one night, Fiona walks into a bar, and she sits down in the bar area. And poor Fiona, she is broke. Like, she can't afford a drink. Now the bartender, his name's Richard. And Richard, he's a nice guy, and he feels bad for her. So, he offers to get her a drink. And Fiona and Richard, they chat back and forth a bit, and Fiona starts to notice, damn, Richard's looking kind of fly. Like, he is fine. Like, okay. So they chat for a bit, and eventually she heads out. But even after she leaves, Fiona can't stop thinking about Richard. He is always on her mind. He is so fine. And most importantly, he was paying attention to her. And from here on, she thinks about Richard every single night. She can't get him out of her head. She has to go back and see him. So she not only goes back to the bar, but she starts showing up there regularly. Every time he works, hoping to see him. Hoping to get any chance to talk with him and get his attention. And Richard, you know, he's polite, he chats with her, he's friendly, but he's just not romantically interested in her. Now, here's the thing about Richard. Richard is not only a bartender, he's also an amateur stand-up comedian. Like, he gets up on stage and he does comedy shows, and sometimes he puts on one-man shows and stuff like that. And Fiona, because she's always thinking about Richard, she's like, oh, he's a comedian? Cool, I'll just go to his stand-up shows and I'll support him. And she does. She starts showing up to all his shows. And she'll, like, sit in the audience and she'll laugh at all his jokes. And Richard, he thinks, you know, the support is nice. Like, it's always nice to have fans of your work. But then Fiona takes it even further. She starts following him and waiting outside his house at night and just randomly appearing in places he's at and just being a creep. But in her mind, she feels like she has to be around him and she has to be in contact with him. So she gets a hold of his contact details and she starts calling him all the time, texting him and emailing him and contacting him on social media and tweeting at him and saying sexually suggestive things like, my curtains need hung badly. And she also writes him letters and sends him packages and anything so that he'll notice her and maybe eventually he'll want to smash. But Richard simply isn't interested. Plus, she's almost twice his age. He's like 23, 24 at this point. She's around 50 years old. So at this point, Richard is starting to get freaked out. He feels like Fiona is stalking him. And he doesn't really know her all that well, and he doesn't know how far she'll take this whole stalking thing. Like, she could show up to his comedy show one day with a knife. He don't know. So finally, Richard's had enough. And he goes and he reports her to police. But unfortunately, police, they don't help him all that much. Basically, they're skeptical. According to Richard, police say they don't think a woman stalking a man is all that big of a threat. So now, with nothing stopping her, Fiona continues stalking Richard. She keeps trying to contact him, and she does everything she can to be near him. She starts hanging around his friends. She even finds his parents' contact info and starts calling and harassing his parents. And then, at one point, Richard meets a nice woman and he starts dating her and they get into a relationship. And Fiona learns that he's seeing someone and she's like, oh hell no, who is this bitch? And she starts harassing this woman until the point it ruins this poor woman's relationship with Richard. And so the stalking continues. And this goes on for like 3 or 4 years. And in that time, Fiona sends Richard over 41,000 emails, over 740 tweets, 106 pages worth of letters, and 350 hours worth of voicemail messages. Homegirl is sprung. Meanwhile, while all this has been going on, Richard, he's been working hard, trying to hone his comedy routine. And he's been working on a one-man show, and it's about how he got essayed by another man early on in his career. And the show's called Monkey See, Monkey Do. And it's raw, and it's vulnerable, and when the show's finally ready, he premieres it at a well-known performing arts festival called the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And this one-man show is immediately a hit with festival audiences, and it wins an award for Best Comedy Show. And after that, his one-man show blows up a little locally. Like, it has several sellout runs at the Soho Theatre. He tours the show around the UK and Europe. Then he writes a second one-man show. And this show is actually about the crazy experience he had with Fiona stalking him. And he calls this second show Baby Reindeer, after a pet name that Fiona had often used for him. Like, he tours it around, and it wins a bunch of awards, and he starts adapting the show for TV, where he basically combines his first one-man show, Monkey See, Monkey Do, with the second show, Baby Reindeer, into one long-form drama series. And then he sells that series to Netflix. So Netflix picks it up, and Richard himself stars in the Netflix show playing himself. Now, admittedly, the series is a bit embellished. It's not 100% 100% true, but it is based on some true events. And Richard is careful to change all the characters' names and identifying information so that nobody's true identity is revealed. Not even Fiona. And crazy enough, that show blows the fuck up. And it quickly gets to #1 on Netflix in 30 countries. And all of a sudden, things are going great for Richard. But then, people watch his series on streaming and they're like, hey, wait a minute. If this is based on a true story, I want to know who this stalker really is. Like, where can we find this woman? Now, in the show, they don't use her real name. They call the stalker Martha. So suddenly, everyone on the internet is looking for the real Martha, so they can, I don't know, shame her, I guess? I don't know. So fans of the show, they start digging around. Now remember, Fiona used to tweet at Richard, often enough. So fans, they start looking at all the people who used to tweet at Richard back in the day, and they find a bunch of tweets from a Twitter user named Fiona Harvey 2014. Including one tweet that says, my curtains need hung badly. And collectively, the internet is like, it's her!
Oh yes, the real estate business. Found anything you liked, amigo? Great to hear. Now, I would normally ask what you need it for, but I think we all know the answer. Bring some of that producto of yours so I can do my magic. In the future, I might have some additional work for you. Oh, don't be hasty, cabron. In time. First, let us see what you're made of, huh? Muy bien. Since you are there, let's talk about the job that needs to be done. You are a quick learner. Fantastic. Come back with the treats, and let's make some money, eh? See you next time.
Pues, what do you think? It comes at a very good price.
shit is exciting, but it also brings a lot of attention.
Beat his
Being
ass.
silent about your business can backfire with more trouble. Just because you actually give a fuck. If not, then have a good one.
Shush.
Gracias, amigo. We got the dope, see? Genial, amigo. See you later.
Hey, how's business?
No, they don't heal, but...
Oh, shit. Oh, beat his ass. Beat his ass, fucker. Oh.
No!
Now what do you need? Come by when I restock. I'm sure you'll find something for yourself.
Hey, you lost, buddy? All right, you're not doing like that, huh? Kill him, kill him!
Whoa, whoa. Hold on now.
You don't want to go too high with that criminal status.
No, please, be
Higher
cool.
statuses
No more.
mean way more trouble. I'd wait it out a bit if I were you.
Please, leave me alone. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
Oh, hello there. Came back to buy something?
Leave me alone. Please, leave me alone. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Please, don't kill me. No, please, we cool. No more. Please, don't kill me. Please, leave me alone.
Goodbye, friend. Come back soon.
Please, leave me alone. No, please, we cool. No more. No, please, we cool. No more. Please, don't kill me. Please, don't kill me. No, please, we cool. No more.
Yeah! Let's see him. Let's see him. Now you're fucked. Kill him. Kill him. Come here. Kill him. Kill him. Fucker. Gah. Beat his ass. No, please, we cool. No. Please don't kill me.
Hey, you lost, buddy?
Please
you're
don't
a
kill
tough
me.
guy, huh?
Beat his ass.
I just came back to get my thing. Fuck off. Oh, you know what? No, I have no money.
Please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Please leave me alone. Kill him. Kill him. That's it? Well, pity. Goodbye.
No, not there.
Please don't kill me. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. No, please. Be cool. No.
Can I help you? Bye, friend. Come back soon.
Hey, you lost, buddy? Yeah. Oh. Come here. Oh. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
Mushrooms. This isn't what I was trying to do in the first place.
What is it? Let's talk the details. is it?
Oh, fuck, you scared me.
Huh, right, you scared me.
Hey, you're not a cop, right?
Okay. All right, get him. Come here, fucker. Beat his ass. How do you like that, huh? Beat his ass. Come here, fucker. How do you like that, huh? Oh, don't let him get away.
No! No! I was supposed to save this guy. Ow. Okay.
My help has a price.
Pasa cuando vuelva a tener más material. Estoy segura de que encontrarás algo.
Okay, whatever. Yeah, I lost all my money again. Oh, frick's sake. sad. Can't save him.